So with that, please help me introduce Rob Graff and Michael Gelber for Region 10 highlights, please. Come in, guys.
Good morning, WRC. It is a thrill for me to be back at yet another WRC. I think I'm with John Tate and a few others from Region 9, probably the sole those of us who were at every WRC since its inception, so it's always a treat to be here. We've heard a lot about having giants, and we have giants in our region as well. We also have some rangers, some lone rangers, but Michael and I are going to try to do something a little different. We're going to do a little trivia-based action. Go back a little bit. Peter, you're running way too fast on me. We're going to do something a little different here, a little trivia question. And it was going to go, this is a test, so there are no prizes for the test. There'll be prizes later. But we're going to start off by asking, what region's home city has the only NFL team with a winning record? See, enough of that baseball talk. This is football season. So the next test question was going to sound something like, which is the only region that has 2 of the top 3 NCAA football teams in it? Well, let's get to some of the real presentation. 2010, what a year it's been. It was. It was just a great year in so many ways, between recovery and green, between transitions. There was never more to do and less time to do it in, but it was a fantastic year. In our region, we had change. It started last October when we brought on Chelsea Walliser. I hope many of you got to meet Chelsea over the last couple of days. She's now in Portland with Martha Johnson and George. Chelsea is an exceptional executive assistant. She comes with passion, energy. She came right off the campaign to us. She understands client service. And I'm going to start with client service, and we're going to end with a little client service story. Chelsea got to work with C Alaska. Many of you know the role of the regional administrator has morphed a little bit into outward reaching. Community, customer, the stakeholder interests. And we had an organization called C Alaska, Native Corporation up in Alaska, and they wanted to work with us on a specific project. And we engaged them. And George went up to meet with them last weekend in Juneau, last Saturday, in fact. And in their presentation document, and I don't know if the cameras can get this and zoom in on this, in their presentation document, the second line they have is, thank you to Chelsea Walliser for all the work she did in working with them to understand our project and then lining up the meetings with them. So it's just an interesting example of how people don't have to be in GSA for years and years to really understand what we're trying to do with customer service, how they can be on board and within weeks picking up the client service mantra. I'm also thrilled that we were able this year to bring Michelle Clow back. Many in the Western Regions Conference, especially in Region 9, remember Michelle is the HR director down in San Francisco. Michelle had left GSA and Federal Service, and we were able to bring her back. Is Michelle out there anywhere? The lights are very bright, but Michelle, there she is, we'll wave. We're thrilled to have you back. Most of you had the opportunity to listen to George Northcroft. I hope you got a chance to meet him outside of the stage here. He is the real deal. His energy, his passion, his perspective is just a tremendous asset to us. I've known George for what is, I guess, 5.5, 6 months now. It feels like I've known George most of my life. We're that close, and we do everything as a group. But really the best thing we did in 2010, the highlight of the year, was being able to select a FAST regional commissioner, one who has experience, not only years of experience in the FAST organization, but also brings with him a public building service perspective. So there's nothing more thrilling for me in 2010 than the selection of Michael Gelber as our regional commissioner for FAST. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you very much, Robert. This is a pleasure. As a former Great Lakes Region employee, we've always heard about this conference. So it's a pleasure to actually be here and see it. It's a wonderful event. I mean, Jeff, your folks and all the 4 regions have done a great job putting this together. One of the things that makes being in the Northwest Arctic region so comforting for me personally is just the fact that Rob Graff is such a stable force in our region. Rob has been there 13 years. And I have had the pleasure of working with Rob off and on in my career with GSA for chunks of that time. So it's such a comfort when you move across the country, and it's a surprisingly long way. When I got on that first flight in December from Chicago to Seattle, I was sort of thinking to myself, well, this is different. I mean, you sort of process it intellectually, but then you're thinking, this is really going to happen. And when the plane landed, I turned on my BlackBerry like a good compulsive bureaucrat that I am, and I saw a message from Rob saying, welcome to Seattle, welcome to the Northwest Arctic region. So it was very comforting for me personally, and Rob's a great asset to our region. So.
Now, we're going to try this and see how this goes. It's,
okay.
You're up, right?
Okay, so as part of our trivia, before I ask a question about what you see on the screen, what is the name for somebody who studies flags? This is just a test question. No, that's maps.
I like that.
That was good. It's actually, you're right. The word is vexology. Vex being the Latin for flag, so you translated it. So it's good. You know Latin. So now the second test question with for this.
Can I? And if you're from the state that's
yeah.
being asked about, you're excluded from the competition. So a little honor system here, okay? I know it. We got a bunch of homies here.
Okay, so the second test question is, what state flag is this? Oh, there we're very good. Okay, and now the question for the big prize, or one of the prizes that we have, is what is the state sport in Alaska?
I heard it over here first.
And the answer is dog mushing. For those of us who were like me 8 months ago, I had no idea what dog mushing meant. It's the dog races on sleds like the Iditarod. So that's our question on Alaska.
When Michael arrived, he and I started talking about how do we collaborate better. PBS, FAST, we tried several things. In fact, we tried a thing called the Office of Future about 11 years ago where leadership sat together. Some of it worked, some integration, some collaboration, but it really wasn't as rich and as deep as we had hoped. So we started a conversation. And George came along, and George got into this discussion about how do we bring our organizations together. And so about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, we went to a little place in the Olympic Mountains called Hood Canal, Alderbrook, and we spent a day and a half together. And the first day, this is built on maybe the RC model of meetings. The first day we met just as us as a leadership group, the directors of both services along with the RCs. And then the second day, we brought George in to outbrief him on what we had decided. Now, when I did the kickoff for this thing, I used my fingers, but these guys have great props here. They really do. And so they've equipped me with props. In fact, we've learned to juggle. We're good jugglers now. We can juggle. See how talented we are?
No, sorry.
Anyway, that's talent, guys. What I was doing with my fingers, I'll do with this. You know, the discussion about FAST and PBS business is, are we this? Are we this? Are we this, or are we that? And in fact, we commissioned a study. Todd Gillis, who was on stage earlier, led that study a couple years ago, where we really looked at business opportunities. And I think the answer to that study at the time was there were about 7% of the business opportunities that overlap between FAST and PBS. And so the discussion at Alderbrook was compartmentalized into 3 areas. Administrative services. We are one region. We're 2 business lines. We have administrative needs. Is that something that overlaps like that, or like that? Same conversation for the business. We knew it was 7% 2 years ago. Where do we want it to be? We doubt it will ever be this, but can it be something like that? And then for leadership, we are one region. We are one culture. Our employees go from FAST to PBS in the blink of an eye. Why do we have different value sets? Why do we talk things in terms of leadership development in different terms? So again, can we expand our leadership to overlap? So those are the 3 things we looked at.
And in terms of the leadership question, it was just a good opportunity for the leaders within FAST and the leaders within PBS just to get together and know each other and know a little more about their business. It's surprising. I've been with GSA for 22 years. The first 8 years I was in the Public Building Service, and I didn't even know FSS and FTS existed. I think the organization has come a long way since those days, where bringing people together in a much better way. And on the leadership side, we looked at ways to develop that kind of shared value statement for the entire region, because obviously, if you don't have that core similarity, the rest of it begins to fray at the edges as well.
The team looked on the business front and really identified a number of areas where there was ample room for better collaboration, better opportunities to bring the business together. First and foremost is just a list of the projects. knowing when leases were expiring, which leases would likely be succeeded or renewed in their existing location versus which leases would probably wind up going open market and potentially relocating, and getting fast into the conversation early so that we can position ourselves to advocate with our customers for, what's furniture, what FF&E kinds of activities do they need. Green teams. We are about to launch in each of our major facilities a green team composed of GSA as well as the major tenant agencies of that building. And it was important to us and really important to Michael to have FAS in that green team for each of those facilities, even though they may not be resident in those facilities, to have them on part of the green teams. We had a conversation about opening up federal supply schedules to GSA PBS's contractors. And there are authority issues, and we need to overcome some of those challenges. But imagine if our contractors can order off the supply schedule, what that can do in terms of leveraging our ability. And the last thing was to have our regional account managers on the PBS side work more directly and closely linked with the CSDs, customer service directors, on the FAST side. So those are the business opportunities.
And then on the administrative side, one of the things, truthfully, if you're with PBS, if you want to sort of antagonize somebody from FAST, is not give our products and services an opportunity, when you're ordering something for your office, to not use or take a look at a FAST offering. So what we'd like to do in our Auburn building is basically have one supply store, if you will, one supply opportunity where all the supplies bought into that office, into that building, would come through a FAST offering and be made available to everybody, both PBS and FAST. We also looked at training opportunities. We wanted to unify how we handle training in the region. We're looking at how we hire employees. Rather than have each office set up its own hiring methodology, its own questions, its own interview panels, we're having individuals from both offices serve on the other services interview panel, because we're really interested in getting the best person for GSA. If you look at your own personal careers, very few people have stayed in that same office for the entire career. Some of us have and become expert in that field, but many of us have moved around considerably. And we want to make sure that the people we hire have that flexibility from day one, and it's not something that sort of we learn through happenstance.
Okay, trivia time. This is a $5 Starbucks card, so you'll know what you're vying for. And Michael will throw it out to the first one. He hears yell the correct answer. Anybody guess what state flag that is? That's not the question. Okay, so all you Idahoans, you're not allowed to play in this, but everybody else can. And the question is, which was the first winter vacation ski resort destination in the United States? God, Michael, we need to make these harder.
There. Sorry.
I want to talk for just a minute about one of our major capital projects that occupied a lot of time in the past year. Every one of the four western regions have borders. In fact, I think between the four regions, we have about 90% of the national border program. So we all have border stations. We're all proud of them. But the Peace Arch project, which was the complete, Peace Arch is the north end of I-5. So those of you who know Sunny Cedro down in south of San Diego on I-5, if you took it all the way north without hitting a stoplight, you would run into Peace Arch, sitting between Vancouver, British Columbia, which is about 9 miles north of the border station. So it's really proximate, actually suburban Vancouver, and about 160 miles to the south of Seattle, Washington. It is bound by water on one side, a international park on the other side, a community cutoff to the south, and then obviously the Canadian border to the north. A very complex siting situation, years of deliberation in terms of how we were going to solve the problem. We had to build a bridge that is northbound I-5 over the station so they could get access to the booth and southbound. But the difference between this project and many others was the timing of the project. We had a series of media events because every 6 months or so we changed the traffic patterns, and we'd have to get on and have press conferences between myself, the CBP director, the Secretary of State of Washington. We'd be explaining the changes in traffic patterns. We actually got some flybys going to demonstrate the traffic changes. But this was leading up to a special event, and it was called the Winter Olympics. So I don't think any of you with border station projects have had to do that on the eve. In fact, during the construction hosting the Winter Olympic Games. And in fact, that's us hosting Secretary Napolitano from DHS, Washington Governor Chris Gregoire, and Congressman Rick Larson. This was about this time a year ago, as we were doing the preparations for how that project was going to work with reopening of I-5 northbound in order for the Winter Games to proceed. I think my media soundbite was, and it was actually one of those few that was actually played again and again, it was like trying to change the tires on a car while it was moving 60 miles an hour. And we had incredible leadership, incredible project team to work on that. And this is the new piece of art that has just gone up. I haven't seen it in real life yet, but as you come into the United States, once you clear customs and border protection on a berm, and behind it you'll see the Puget Sound. That is the non-sign. So it's a real interesting piece. It almost looks like a bunch of birds or flock of something, but I'm anxious to see it in real life. But that is the latest collection, latest addition to GSA's Art and Architecture program.
One of the activities going on in the Auburn office is what's called the Management Services Center, and they handle schedules for around the world. The Log World schedule, which is a logistics schedule that our office is responsible for, just passed the $1 billion threshold in terms of revenue this year. It's something we are very proud of. We don't actually throw the things out of the airplanes, but we do provide the equipment and the supplies to be loaded onto the plane, and then the loadmasters at the U.S. Air Force get the honor of pushing them out the back. But we also provide a full range of logistic services. It's one of the bigger schedules in FAST, and Jerry Watson, who is here, and I'm going to ask Jerry to stand up. She's not going to like that at all. And did she leave? She was sitting over there. She might have. Oh, there she is. There's Jerry. Jerry's the director of that office, and it's one of the. We're very proud of the accomplishment, just in terms of the numbers of dollars involved. Obviously, $1 billion is a nice sum, but also the fact that we're serving our customers around the world and helping them move stuff from A to B through trains, planes, automobiles, and boats. So. Now, my opportunity here, the trivia on this question is, what is unique about the Oregon flag? And the answer is not that it says Oregon on it, but there is another aspect of this flag. Oh, there we go. Excellent, excellent. If we go to the next slide, it's the only flag that has a different design on both sides. The gentleman right there. Yeah. So you've got the state of Oregon on one side and the symbol for one of the schools in Oregon on the other. Wow. It's a beaver.
If you don't understand that, want to know what that is, see Peter Gray. He can explain beavers and ducks to you. We want to talk for a little bit about ZEF and Recovery Act and Green Proving Ground as well. I know that's been a major, in fact, the two themes of this conference, I think, really have been Green Proving Grounds, ERA Green, and all that. So I'm going to highlight one small project we're doing and two of the large projects that we're doing in our region in recovery. This is the Ketchikan Federal Building. Ketchikan, Alaska is the city on the southernmost point of southeast Alaska. That is the color of the building. You guys might think it is pink. You might think my shirt is pink. In the Pacific Northwest, we prefer to call it salmon. In this Ketchikan is the gateway to the Tsongas National Forest, one of the largest national forests in the United States. A huge lumber industry there, and so we were going so fast in recovery that we were simply going to replace the boilers with traditional fuel-fired boilers. And we had a meeting with a U.S. senator, and in fact, it led to this Sea Alaska thing that I pointed out. And they're producers of biomass fuels. Those are wood pellets, renewable resource, not oil-based. And so we took a time out, went back to the design of this project, and we decided to include biomass. So we have a dual fuel boiler in case something happens to the wood supply, but at least we're looking forward to weaning ourselves off of fossil fuels in terms of Ketchikan. The biggest ERA project we have in our region is the Green Wyatt Federal Building. This is a $140 million modernization of a almost now 40-year-old federal building that's never had a major modernization. It was interesting. Go back to the first slide, please. This was a Skidmore, Owings, Merrill design. It was the last, the concept presentation for the redo was the last thing that Ed Feiner approved as the chief architect before he went back to Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill, which was pretty ironic to those of us who look at quality design and look at the boxes of the 60s, the 70s, and early 80s and think we could do a lot better than that. In fact, our design excellence program has done a lot better than that. We were going to empty the building 3 floors at a time over a phased number of years. We never got the capital to do the construction project. In fact, we had about given up. We were talking about how we could do limited scope work in the building, and then came the Recovery Act. But instead of doing it our way, we had to empty the building all at once in order to get the building done, the funds obligated, and expensed within the time limits. And so the team went back to scratch, said, what can we do? And in 14 short months, came up with a series of brilliant solutions. One of them was to take out the traditional VAV air conditioning system in the building, the cooling system, and replace it with a chilled beam, a radiant cooling system. Now, the problem with that is in Portland in the summer, it gets over 100 degrees, and the west side of the building bakes. And a radiant cooling system doesn't work if the skin of the building gets over certain temperatures. So we had to find a way to protect the west side from what is an intense western sunlight in the summertime. And we came up with the idea of vegetative fins. We could put fins on the building. We could grow vines, plants up the side of the building, some 18 stories. And we proposed that idea, and my God, it took root and grew. It grew so fast and so quickly that on January 30th, 2010, the New York Times on the front page above the fold had a picture of the Green White Federal Building and basically wrote a story about the Hanging Gardens of Portland. And of course, there were green proponents who were very much on our side, and you can imagine the ridicule we were subject to. And we weren't really sure how this, there are 4 different ecosystems within the 100 and almost 200 feet of this building. So they would lose leaves at certain times. We were told the top quarter of the building probably wouldn't grow for 3 years, and the vegetation wouldn't grow. That was an acceptable risk. That was not an acceptable risk to us because we couldn't have those people baking mess. The western sun was going to hit the top floors for the longest time. So we had to figure out how do we back off this commitment we made, and it was perfect timing because Bob Peck was talking about green proving ground. And we didn't have to build it in order to prove it. We had to test it. We had to go in the lab. We had to do all the analysis. But we did go through the proving ground theory and prove that this was not the right system for the building. It had too much risk in it. And in fact, we came up with a system that is a guaranteed system. It's a reed system. Green reeds has similar effects to the greening of the building. The bottom quarter of the building, we do expect vegetation to grow up. And if it grows up a little over the quarter of the building, we'll be thrilled with it. But the point is the building won't have the risk with the higher levels of growth. And the really neat thing about it is that, what was I going to say? The neat thing about the building is we've got a new canopy on it that is PV, so we reduce energy load. It collects stormwater and rainwater that feeds the gray water as well as the vegetation. Oh, here's the cool thing. We needed to empty the building in a hurry. We need to get everybody out of there. 20 some odd agencies. This is our flagship building in the state of Oregon. And we needed to get them out in order to construction. We need to get them out in 14 months. And our real estate people, joining up with the federal acquisition community for telephony and systems work, were able to move these agencies out. The last agency got out 2 weeks ago, and we got nothing but hammers swinging in there now. So it was an amazing collaboration, not only the design and construction community, but the real estate community. Agencies who were reluctant to move. VA was holding us hostage, as you can imagine. So we really did a great job of getting out of this building and getting the project going. And the pundits have gone away and said it was a great example of a learning lab as we were going, a green proving ground. The last project I want to talk about is Federal Center South. It is located about almost a mile and a half south of downtown Seattle. You see in this old slide the King Dome there. Gives you some reference. The Corps of Engineers is in the building closest to the street. They're the major tenant of the building. They have security setbacks that can't be met by the existing building, a historic facade, and we have warehouses in the back. We were in fact, we couldn't get funding to modernize the facility for the Corps of Engineers. We were at risk of losing them into lease space to meet their security requirements. Losing them to lease space would have caused I'm afraid, a domino reaction of not being able to backfill large chunks of Federal Center South, not getting the capital, and it would have been a real drain on our portfolio. Recovery Act comes along at a perfect time. We're able to design a modernization, an adaptive reuse, as we call it, for the Corps of Engineers in tearing down the old warehouse. And this is the first groundbreaking I've ever been to, where instead of using shovels, we use sledgehammers. We're hammering out the wall of the old warehouse. You see George Bob Peck, Colonel Wright in his fatigues, a couple of us hammering out the wall there. The cool thing about, and I don't have the slide that shows it, in the middle of this horseshoe-shaped building, it's an oxbow because of the oxbow on the river, is in the center of it, open to all sides, is a conference center. And the conference center is all wood. The wood timber beams that are from the warehouse are being reused to form that conference center. So it's really very, as Bob Peck called it, he said, when it's built, this will be the ground-up greenest building in our inventory. So we're real proud of it. In fact, we're so proud of it that as the senior regional commissioner, I was invited to go with David Foley over to Helsinki, Finland, to be part of the Workplace Network Conference, and I was able to present a little bit about our Total Green program and then focus on those two. There I am conducting. The guy on the left is a fascinating guy that Dave and I get to spend a little time with. If he looks like he's big and strong, he's a world-class bodybuilder. He's a lawyer. He's from the Oric vacuum cleaner family. He is actually the one guy, David, I think you'd agree, greener than Martha Johnson. And the whole conversation with us was about what are you doing to green federal buildings, because my mission is to green our embassies. His name is Bruce Oric. So if you ever hear or see him, fascinating guy, highest energy I've ever seen in my life.
And on the fast side, and some of the other regions are competent as well, is about the greening of the fleet. What you see here is a Chevy Volt, one of the new electric vehicles that are coming out. And we're partnering with PBS because while it's fast will provide the vehicle, we need the charging station and the place to put the charging station. So we're working with PBS to do that. A concept that many of you might hear about, particularly in Region 9 as well as Region 10, is the BC to BC roadway. It's British Columbia to Baja California. The intent is to create a string, if you will, of charging stations from Vancouver all the way down to the southern border. There's some challenges with that. Right now, technology of these vehicles they can go about 150, maybe 150 miles at the most, and depending on the driving conditions. So that will get you from Seattle to Portland. I know in Southern California, the cities are also close together, but it's that space between San Francisco and Portland that they really need to fill in on this roadway, and in the coming years, we'll see more of that. In addition, we are part, and I would encourage all of you to do this as you're talking to customers, it's not just about getting an electric car. It's not about getting a hybrid vehicle. It's not about getting an alternate fuel vehicle. In the Midwest, they have what's called E85, these ethanol-based vehicles, and they move a lot of them out to this part of the world. There's maybe 2 or 3 of those gas stations in the West. So having that type of vehicle doesn't really work. Having a hybrid vehicle, an electric vehicle in Alaska in the winter doesn't help you either. So there are challenges with that. So the trick as you're working with customers, as we as a region are working with our customers, is to make sure that our customers are not just getting something that looks nice, but works well in their environment. We're partnering up in ways to figure out how to get more green vehicles in that Seattle to Portland space and be our part of that BC to BC roadway. One of the other things that we did here in the region, in the Northwest Arctic region, is the Management Services Center developed a construction management BPA, a blanket purchase agreement. On the PBS side, you needed to award those contracts very quickly. You didn't have the time to go through the full extended procurements. We have about 30 firms that are on contract, on schedule, that can provide CM, construction management services, across the country to make sure that you can get those recovery projects done quickly, obligate that money, spend that money quickly, but also make sure that it works well for the customers, and at the end, the taxpayers get what they've paid for. And finally, this is a picture of a Horizon airplane. As you can see, green is prevalent throughout both the public and private sectors. It's George, Rob, and I have been going around talking to customers, and we're talking to them about sustainability. We're talking to them about the FAST carbon footprint tool that hopefully many of you have heard about. It's an application that allows agencies to measure their greenhouse gas emissions as part of their reporting requirements. We're talking to agencies about telepresence and where best to set up those telepresence capabilities. And we're just working with many of our customers who want to be more green faster than really where GSA is, particularly in our part of the world. Fish and Wildlife Service and other those types of agencies, they want to become comfortably greener, comfortably green, as fast as possible. And our job at GSA, both FAST and PBS, is to help them get there. And finally, as many of you have seen, we've had a series of coins. In our region, we've developed a Recovery Act coin, and Darren Frost, who's here, was our Recovery Act executive, and I'm going to make Darren stand up too. I see Darren right there. So, helped us to get our Recovery Act projects done per the schedules that we provided, per the schedules PBS provided to their central office. The nice thing about these coins is they just weren't for PBS. We provided them to FAST employees who worked on telecommunications, on furniture, on personal property disposal, as well as individuals in the RA's office who helped us get to where we need to be. So thank you very much, Darren, for that.
Okay, we're in the home stretch. Michael, your turn to fling it. My turn to ask it softball question. What does Washington produce more of than any other state in the union?
Oh, I heard it here. Oops.
Apples, if you didn't hear the answer. That was a pretty easy one. We want to talk just a minute about community outreach, and I will take you through an example. In Eugene, Oregon, we moved into a new, a great model of a new courthouse, but the old federal building was still backfilled with federal executive branch agencies. And when we talked about a little over a year ago about helping feed, it was the food drive, if you remember, sponsored by Michelle Obama to help feed those that were less fortunate due to the economy. The team, we have these big planters, these huge planters, maybe they don't look it, but they're about 8 feet wide in diameter. And the team decided to plant fruit and vegetables in them. And we had a community food bank. We've had a few legal issues since then that maybe we needed to look at, but it was a great idea of really becoming vested in the community and helping those less fortunate than us. And the first picture that you saw was some of the abundant fruits and vegetables that we were able to provide the community. In Tacoma Union Station, in 2011, we'll celebrate the 100th anniversary of this building. If you ever get to Tacoma, it is the one example in the nation where a GSA project of about 20 years ago was able to revitalize the community of the downtown community of a major American city. Fantastic. Our renovation of the old Union Station into a courthouse was matched by the State Historic Museum next door, then by the University of Washington, then by the Glass Museum. And if you go downtown Tacoma, which 20 years ago when I first went down there was a combat zone, it is now a very cool place to be. We're going to take a lesson from you guys in San Francisco. We were there when you rededicated the 100-year anniversary of the 7th and Mission Courthouse, and a number of people dressed in period costume. We're going to try to do that for the 100th anniversary of Union Station this summer.
And if we could just keep that slide for a second, when you look at your careers, what goes around sort of comes around. In 1995, I was a project manager on a courthouse in Hammond, Indiana, and then the judges wanted to see the Tacoma courthouse. So we came out to that combat zone and looked at it, and it was a very interesting building. The judges liked the way the space was set up in the building. Going forward in 2010, I now live across the street from that building in one of those renovated lofts. So it's kind of one of those things you never know what to expect in this career. Some things you see something just by happenstance, and then before you know it, it's your neighbor. And then on the FAST side, in terms of community service, the Computers for Learning program. I mean, yesterday we had the experience of giving those young men and women, those boys and girls, those bicycles that we made. And the joy that many of our educational institutions, public schools, private schools around the region, around the country get when they get the tools they need to do, educate our children is great. Within our region, we've handed out about $1 million worth of computer equipment, and we're continuing to look for opportunities to do that. Again, I would encourage you, within GSA, we're very fortunate. We refresh our computers every 3 years. Make sure we're taking advantage of this program so that others can benefit from the IT services that we use and that they can use when we no longer need them. Now we're going to switch over to the 3 things that Martha Johnson has talked about: operational excellence, customer intimacy, and innovation. Just with some examples within our region about that, and then we'll looking at really sort of all 3 combined. We've all heard about fires. I think Region 9 talked about the fires in Colombia. Region 7 talked about the fires in Russia, and for the record, we can see Russia from our region, which is always good. But also within the United States, it's not a particularly bad fire season in the lower 48, But up in Alaska, there was about 600 wildfires that they had to deal with during the course of the year. And FAST employees, both in Region 7 as well as in Region 10, work together in a collaborative fashion to make sure the men and women who fight these fires get the meals, get the shelter, the tools they need to do their work. And sometimes, I mean, we do things, we don't even know what we do in terms of we just sort of go about our work. It's part of our daily course of business. And then we get told about something, how we've sort of affected somebody's life and lives in a very powerful way. This is a letter I received from the Department of Interior. It was a thank you letter. It was very kind of them to write the thank you letter. And they talk about how the strong cooperation is among us regardless of our agency affiliations. What fortunately happened here was a plane carrying 3 federal employees as well as a contract pilot crashed in Alaska, and there was a rather large search effort to find those individuals. There's no happy ending to the story, unfortunately. All 3 are still missing and presumed dead. But the issue here for us in FAST is we were just sort of doing our job, just like many of you do every day, to serve our customers when they are most in need, whether it's individuals in Haiti, American Samoa, you heard about earlier this week. But here we are helping out these folks to try to find some of their colleagues. As I said, it's not always a good ending to these stories, but the fact that we're there is the most positive thing that we can offer our fellow customers.
I said I would start with a customer service story. I'm going to wrap up with 2 customer service stories because I really think those are the most powerful examples of how we do what we do on a daily basis, and we make a difference to the agencies and the people we serve. This is a photograph of the Foley Federal Building and Courthouse. That's the larger building in the background, and the old historic. We celebrated the 100th anniversary of that last year. The Spokane Post Office and Courthouse. The Foley building was supposed to undergo, ready to go, a systems test back in May. Over the weekend, we were going to shut the building down and take out the electricity and do all those things. We had a long commitment to need to do that. We had the contractor ready to go. And at the 11th hour, the IRS, who's a tenant in this building, came to us and said, oh, this is the weekend that every IRS in the country is supposed to be open for the weekend to process activities, and if you close the building, we will be the only IRS office in the nation that will not be able to meet that mission of being open that weekend. We really didn't want to delay the work in the building because we needed it for the ARA project that we have going there. So the team got together, got innovative, customer intimacy, and operational excellence, and they said, hey, it's what we can do for significantly less cost than it would have been to stop our work. We can move the necessary requirements for the IRS into the old federal building, which wasn't going to be effective. Bring their computers, bring their phones over, allow them to do their thing in temporary space in the old building, and we got rave reviews. The event went without a hitch. The IRS is still, I think, thanking us, Jim Porter and his team who did that to this day. So a great client service story about where innovation and customer intimacy came together. The last slide will show Jim Weller studying it hard. Again, in my other hat as the senior regional commissioner, I was allowed to organize and host a meeting. This is a meeting where we met for a day, and then Bob Peck came back in. In fact, we're trying to get to the Marriott in Marina Del Rey. They wouldn't accommodate us, so instead we had to go to the Ritz-Carlton. The Ritz is an interesting. The guy that facilitated this book, Tim mentioned, the guy that facilitated us was Joseph Michelli, who wrote the book about the gold standard, the new Ritz-Carlton book. And it was interesting to listen to Joseph tell his stories about Ritz-Carlton and their extraordinary customer service. I mean, he's telling us these stories and telling us these stories, and we were trying to figure out. We finally had Jeff was going to put on a slideshow, and we couldn't figure out how to get the big screen TV on. I mean, there are 12 senior executives in a room, can't figure out how to get the on button to work, so we had to call the front desk. They sent a guy down. He reached up top behind it where nobody would ever look, turned it on like that. And the room was cold, and we mentioned something about it being cold. There was a third complaint we had. I don't remember what it was. We simply mentioned it, and within 10 minutes, all of it disappeared. Then we had lunch. Lunch was tacos. It was Ritz-Carlton tacos, not just your ordinary tacos. And I think Jeff and I and Glenn and maybe Mary, we had more guacamole than we should have and I used to think it was Brother Weller or Brother Jim. Now it's Colonel Jim. I know that. I learned something today. But Colonel Jim got last. He was doing Blackberries or something, and he finally got there, and it was just, I think, you and I, and one busboy standing there quietly, and Jim said, you know what, we're out of guacamole. What a shame. I like guacamole, and we were out. He went and sat down, and within 5 minutes, get the next one. I mean, that's not a little bit of guacamole. This guy brought in a trough of guacamole. So, I mean, that's just outstanding customer service. I don't, the Ritz-Carlton probably paid $3 or $4 for that trough of guacamole, but here I am in front of 250 to 300 people telling a Ritz-Carlton story. It's priceless. Think about that as you go back and talk to your people about customer service. We did not talk about our talents. I'm not sure what they are, Michael.
Minor limited.
We didn't celebrate a lot this year. We need to do that better in Region 10. I think we've been so busy, so focused on getting things done, we haven't taken that step back. We have examples. Charisse is out here. You had sent me some pictures of some fun we had down in Portland. We need to do more of that. We need to express more of that. But the reason we didn't focus on our talent was we think we are a region full of world-class talent. And everything we displayed is representative of that world-class work that our employees are doing. So we're so proud of you. Thank you for doing what you do.